Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today we're going to explore something that's been floating around in both spiritual and UFO communities for quite a while. That's the year 2027. It's one of those years that people keep pointing to, whispering about, sometimes yelling about it, like it's the end of the world or the beginning of something new. And in a way, maybe it is. Or maybe it's just another calendar year. After all, I did survive the end of the Mayan calendar. Seriously, this is different. Either way, we're going to talk about what's being said, who's saying it, and most importantly, what it might mean for us as individuals that are attempting to live differently in the world. So let's look at it. The importance of 2027, why the spiritual and UFO communities are obsessed with this year. So, why 2027? It's not like 2012 where everyone was saying that the world was going to end. This 2027 date has different energy around it. It's a bit more vague, it's less specific, and in a way that makes it more believable because it's not just one group saying this is the year. It's everyone. It's remote viewers, it's military folks, UFO whistleblowers, yogis, New Age thinkers, people who talk to dead people, people who talk to aliens, people who don't talk to anybody, even people who don't usually fall into the woo-woo category are starting to point at 2027 and saying, yeah, something's coming. Some say that there will be mass disclosure, that the government will finally admit we're not alone. And in the case of, if that is the deal, right, that's the year of disclosure, I believe that if disclosure does occur, it will be a situation where they being the power structure, will have no control over it. They will be forced to acknowledge the phenomenon. It will be so glaringly obvious that they won't be deciding shit. We will all just know at that point. Others say it's a spiritual shift, that it's an energetic wave, a point in time when Earth steps into kind of a new dimension. Some claim it's when alien contact will go public. Others say it's the collapse of something that we've built that's just too high, i.e. society, the economy, the illusion of control. It's a bit of a Tower of Babel situation. Another angle to this would be to consider how we as human beings project our inner psychology, our inner psychological tension outward into some future date and hope that whatever's happening will resolve the issue. It's the same as an individual having so much trauma and inner turmoil that they tend to focus on some unsolvable external issue so that they don't have to ever address the real crisis, which is inward. Because you see, if it's a solvable external issue, then they run the risk of losing their target and again have to go inward. Not that Americans do that sort of thing with causes or anything like that, whether it's a political cause or a social cause. Honestly, we are far too emotionally intelligent to fall into that trap, So 2027, it might not be about aliens, about angels and timelines. It might just be about us. And maybe, just maybe, the reason everyone's talking about 2027 is because deep down we know something has to give, right? This entire cultural apparatus isn't sustainable. And for those of you that are upset that you're, American or God forbid Caucasian, I mean this all globally. I don't give a shit which patch of the fucking dirt that you're on. Whatever you're doing, it's not sustainable. Look at Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Haiti. On the surface, these are all different problems that everyone can use to point to their own pet issue, but at the core, they're all the same. Not linked, but, like whoever, I don't know who said it, but when they said history doesn't repeat itself, but it sometimes rhymes, well, so does suffering. Anyway, I digress. So let's let's look at some of the voices that are kind of talking about this. One of the most talked about figures is David Grush. David is a former intelligence official and whistleblower. And he's also, another fun fact about Dave is that he's unable to give a straight answer to literally every single question that this dipshit is asked, which leads me to believe that he's some sort of a counterintelligence dupe. But he did make headlines in 2023 when he testified that the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft and that there's been a decades-long cover-up, which those of us die like, okay, great, thanks for telling us shit we already knew. But it wasn't just what he said, it's kind of what he withheld that's interesting. Grush kept referencing the year 2027. And he wouldn't say why directly, shocker, because, that would be answering the question. But his language hinted at something big kind of coming, being on the horizon. But when he's asked what's coming, he'd just say things like, people aren't ready, or it'll change everything. It's very vague. It's not dismissive. It's just the kind of answer you give when you know something, but you can't say what it is. Which makes everyone like you so much more. Or it's the kind of answer you give because you're a counter-intel patsy that's being used by the government because this jackass actually hasn't seen a single fucking thing with his own fucking eyeballs. He's just seen paperwork. Now, if you're detecting frustration in my voice, that's because all of us UFO folks that have been invested in this shit since our childhoods, we're experiencing a kind of blue balls and we're just fatigued at this point. And I'm not talking to you guys that, you got into it in 2017 when it was convenient. I'm talking to those of us that have sacrificed entire Thanksgiving dinners for this. But the UFO field itself is just filled with these patsy characters that are accidentally finding the proof of things like documents and shit, that we later find out those documents and that proof was actually planted in their face by someone else. So, here's a little tidbit for those of you normies or UFO casuals. If I had a bunch of secrets, right, about real shit, I might tell you something that's not real. I might only tell you this fake secret because I want to see if it comes back to me, see if I can trust you, so I can find a leak, as it were. So when it comes to David Grush, I don't know, man, whatever. He's super fucking annoying. Now, there's one of my favorites, though this guy exhausts me as well. He's gotten meaner as he's gotten older. Dr. Stephen Greer. Greer has been talking about this mass disclosure thing for years, since the 90s, actually. That's what he usually leads with. He brags about, I in 1990, blah, 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 I briefed Bill Clinton and he wouldn't fucking listen to me. Shocker. It is interesting that he has been able to get in the faces of these big shots. So that is interesting. I just, you know what it is? I am just UFO tired. I can't let it go. I love it. We still see lights. Saw 4 wild things the other night. And, I don't even know if I give a shit if there's ever disclosure. I don't know. I do think 2027 is interesting. But Greer's been saying that by the mid-2020s, that the world will either awaken to our galactic family or fall deeper into military industrial control. But he's real big on the black budget stuff, which is essentially that our governments are paying private companies to work on this shit, which is really scary because that means that there's a private company out there with a gravity propulsion system and it's not the U.S. military. But you can often find Dr. Stephen Greer prattling on about black budget secrecy and that the government actually doesn't know what's happening. But anyway, he says that 2027 marks like this kind of tipping point, like it's a deadline for transformation or deception. Again, it just depends which way the wind blows. But he also created the CE5 protocol, which is a method of calling in craft or experiences. Here at the Welsh House, we've engaged in it often, and it works. You will definitely have experiences. They might not be what you thought they were going to be. And they can literally keep you up at night, but they happen. Now, in the spiritual space, people like Lee Harris, a popular channeler, fleecer, and hack, and an absolute insufferable twat, as well as Dolores Cannon students, they've all hinted at 2027 as a time of energetic shift. These I mention out of principle. Both Lee Harris and Dolores Cannon's students are hardly reliable spiritual touchstones. About Dolores, I don't dislike the lady, RIP, R.I.P. Dolores, but if you only do hypnosis sessions with people that think that they are special, like she did all these hypnosis sessions to find all this shit out, as does her daughter and all these people, but it would be different if like you worked in mental health and you're a hypnosis therapist person and you're hypnotizing people on trauma and whatever, this stuff naturally comes up, but it doesn't. They kind of fish for it. So no shit, all of your clients think that they are once an Egyptian fucking whatever. But in the yogic world, some say that 2027 is when the Kali Yuga, the dark age or the age of lies and deceit, starts to kind of lose its grip. And we begin to go into what's called the Satya Yuga. Some say also that like it's the coming of the age of Aquarius. Either way, there's a lot of conflicting information and conflicting math when it comes to calculating when these ages stop and start. Again, it's all just fucking vague. Let me try to pull this podcast together because it's a topic that I think is interesting, but it's also one of those things that when you start talking about it out loud, you're like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have brought this up. But there's also the Farsight Institute, right? A group of remote viewers. They're legit, but they claim that all of these trained psychics saw something massive happening around that time. And again, no specifics. So, but there's also Project Looking Glass, which is run by the military. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, good luck. But they said they couldn't see past 2027. Like time itself becomes unstable or becomes blocked. I find it interesting that the military are the ones that can't see, but other people can. Then there's my favorite, Chris Bledsoe, maybe one of the most important experiencers alive now. If you've never heard of him, I did a whole episode on the spiritual implications of his story, of his experience. But the short version is that he's a North Carolina contractor who went through a series of terrifying, profound encounters with what he calls the lady, which was like this glowing feminine presence that seems to be part divine, part alien. But what's odd about Mr. Bledsoe's story is that it has drawn the attention of NASA, the CIA, and some very high-level government officials, and not in a methed out crazy way, but more like, it might actually be true. Like it's literal, like it's factual. And these organizations aren't trying to silence him. They have questions. They are concerned. They question him. They want to know more. He's been tested, and he's not some conspiracy YouTuber. He's essentially a mystic with government clearance, which is kind of crazy. It's not a joke. That's Chris Bledsoe. But he's deeply spiritual. His encounters, they're not just ships and lights. They're about messages. And one message that he's shared is that something big is coming in 2027. He won't say exactly what, but he keeps pointing toward that year as a pivot point. Not just for contact, but for the human soul. And what I love about Bledsoe is that he doesn't say run. He says pray. He says meditate, get your house in order. It's not fear. It's like spiritual preparation. And that resonates with me very deeply. And I think it resonates with a lot of us because it's not just about what's coming. It's about who we are when it comes. But Bledsoe and Grush, they aren't the only ones. Richard Dolan, one of my favorite researchers, one of the most knowledgeable, level-headed researchers out there. He's very grounded, historically minded, great UFO researcher, but he's talked about 2027 as a possible disclosure window, and not because of prophecy, but because of his sources, many of them military and intelligence. That's what they point to. It's like a deadline. But again, he's careful with his words, but even he seems to think that by then something will have to give. Now you've also got Linda Moulton Howe. She's a legend, and she's been documenting government secrecy and alien encounters since the 1980s. Linda's been talking recently about how multiple whistleblowers are now telling her that by 2027, the public will have undeniable proof that we are not alone. But she's not calling it the end of the world. She's just saying it's the end of an old paradigm. Back to the Farsight Institute, which is led by Courtney Brown. They published remote viewing sessions, and listen, I know that remote viewing isn't for everyone. Some of you are very skeptical, but you got to remember to, be skeptical, but don't be cynical. But these are well-trained individuals. What they're reporting is upheaval, contact, and major shifts around 2027. Whether it's literal, who knows? But a lot of remote viewers are all converging on the same year, saying the same thing. Whitley Strieber, the guy that wrote Communion, he doesn't name 2027 directly, but he's been talking about a moment of return when the beings that he calls the visitors will make themselves known in a big way. He's also made it clear that he thinks it's soon. I don't know if it's next week or 5 years, but that lines up kind of, I guess. Even Ross Coulthart, again, someone that I trust. He's an investigative journalist who interviewed Grush and broke that 2023 story. He's said multiple sources independently confirmed to him that 2027 is a significant year. Again, he won't say what, but that there's a level of convergence that's rare. So what the hell is going on? You've got military, whistleblowers, journalists, mystic experiencers, remote viewers all circling the same year. That's not your average internet theory. That's a signal. Now, what do we do with this signal is up to us. So why does this click with so many of us? Why does this resonate? Why is it when someone says something big's happening in 2027, we all kind of go, yeah, fucking probably. Because whether or not something external happens in 2027, something internal is happening right now. Our systems are cracking. The world it doesn't feel stable. The old models of control, government, money, media, they're all starting to look like stage props. And more of us are really going inward. The outward doesn't really hold anything for us anymore. And this, again, this was the benefit of COVID. COVID was apocalyptic in the most literal sense. It pulled the veil back. The internet, social media, also apocalyptic. These things gave us access. There are adults right now that weren't alive for the Tom Brokaw trusted news anchor era. They never saw an actual journalist. They've only really seen bloggers. They don't know what that even means. Quite frankly, the more I learn, I don't know that it ever existed, but sure. Some people can say that these things are all bad, but I just don't feel that way. We have evidence that these factors that some feel were bad for the culture, things like social media, for instance, that they're actually good for the culture in more ways than they are bad because we can now talk, right? Ideas that were once fringe conspiracy theories, we now know are facts. And a lot of that is because of social media. And this is very threatening to the power structure, right? That's what all these calls for censorship are about. These politicians circle their wagon around somebody who's hurt some tiny sliver of the population. And, they're doing it because it's just so cruel. But really, it's just to bring about larger censorship. Look at Britain, look at Germany. People are put in jail for social media posts, right? Now everything counter to the government's position or the government's narrative is considered hate speech. Well, you just can't have people saying crazy racist shit in the streets. First of all, yes, you can. You can absolutely have people saying crazy racist shit in the streets, because if someone just starts ranting about something crazy, you now know who the dipshit is, right? But it's offensive. Yep. And like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, you can't carpet the world in leather, but you can put some fucking shoes on. He didn't say fucking shoes, but you can't put shoes on. Because the problem is that it doesn't stop with the mean things and the racist things. Now it's stuff that this board of pencil-necked ass hats and pleated khakis decides is dangerous and mean. And those boards are usually made up of lawyers that are trying to feel relevant, because without their identity as a lawyer, they feel weird and hollow because there's nothing else interesting about them. They are largely unremarkable people that just managed to memorize things in college. So anyway, 2027. But, these existential, identity-threatening world events are very interesting to me. They have us asking things like, who am I outside of the system? If what's real if I can't trust the news? What happens when I die? Like, what's flying around in the skies? And those are worth asking, right? I know we see things flying around in the skies. So, but, all the energy leading up to 2027 feels kind of pressure cooker adjacent. I don't want to say it is, but there's a pressure there, right? The point is that, the transformation isn't necessarily on, January 1st, 2027. It's not then, it's now, right? 2027 is it's like any other date. It's just a mirror, right? It reflects what's already shifting within us. So we prepare not for the world to change, but possibly for us to change. Now let's walk this back a bit. I obviously went on a bit of a tangent. So let's say that full UFO disclosure happens in 2027. Let's say that government leaders stand on their podiums and they admit, yes, we've been working with non-human intelligences. Yes, they're real. Yes, we've lied. They wouldn't say that. They'd probably just make it all of our faults, like the fault of the citizenry. But, even if they say, yeah, it's real, here's the footage, well, then what? Right? Are we ready for that? Are you ready for that? Do you really think you're ready for that? Because it wouldn't just mean aliens are real, right? It would mean that religion, science, history, all of it has to be rewritten. And you see how archaeologists are. Can you imagine how the rest of these motherfuckers are going to be when they find out that what they've built their entire career on isn't necessarily objectively true, right? It might mean that we're not at the top of the food chain, right? It means consciousness, time, space, probably life itself might be way more fluid than we ever thought. Or maybe disclosure won't come from them. Maybe it'll come from us. Right? From the individual having a contact experience, from the inner knowing that we're not just human, right? We're something more. Maybe it comes from dreams, meditation, synchronicities, and all that weird thing that keeps happening to you when you think of that person and then they text you. Maybe these events become so constant that just us as the public, we don't need the government to tell us, right? Maybe disclosure is spiritual awakening. And maybe the reason 2027 is so charged is because we're all being nudged to grow the fuck up, to evolve, to stop waiting for someone else to explain the mystery and start living with it, right? I don't believe that these things just happen overnight, right? I think we're headed toward it, and it started in 2017, honestly, with the Tic Tac video and then the Go Fast video, the gimbal, right? Since then, a lot of people have opened up to this idea. Now, let's look at this from a psychological angle, right? We love deadlines. It's why cults always have deadlines, even in spiritual circles. Like we love an apocalypse, right? Like we love an I told you so moment. And I mean, those things, they give us a frame. It gives us guardrails, a reason to get our shit together, a reason to finally meditate, forgive, heal, journal, right? A reason to clean the emotional attic. And while, some people see 2027 as the event, I think it's more useful to see it as a symbol, right? It's not a deadline. It's a doorway, not something we're racing toward, but probably something we're already walking through. Think of the role of liminality in spiritual practice. As you go through the initiatory process, you begin to think differently, you feel differently, you perceive differently. Then once you pass through the threshold, because liminality in Latin means threshold, you now re-enter the world a changed person. It's a new world. Who you spend time with changes. How you spend your time changes. You are in a new world. You passed through a threshold into a new perception, a new world. That's the path of the initiant. Because if we treat it like 2027, like just this big cosmic, fantastic event, we'll just keep waiting, right? Because it might not be what we thought it was. But if we treat it like a symbol, then we can use it to pull ourselves into presence, into practice, into alignment. We don't need aliens to show up to tell us to live better, to be better. We already know, right? That thing that Ram Dass used to say, that Ram it meant rent-a-mouth. He's like, you already know what I'm saying because when I say it, you all nod your heads, right? We don't need the government to say, yes, the soul is real, right? We can feel it, right? We sense it with silence, with breath, with presence, with love, and it takes me back to the episode that we just did on the simulation. There's something gross about materialists confirming something that we've known for eons, right? To me, there's so much disgusting hubris in it. I would feel ashamed to need the government or some Silicon Valley dork to confirm the soul, or that we continue on after this birth, or that consciousness is non-local, or the very basic fact that other dimensions are real and beings live there and walk alongside us. And for many of you, myself included, we've experienced it. We know what we saw, we know how it felt, and we don't require some unremarkable, skillless, social climbing, parasitic politician to confirm it for us. We already know with a capital K. So, what do we do with this? Well, let's assume 2027 is important. Let's say something big does happen. Let's say disclosure, spiritual shift, or, social collapse. Okay, are you ready? And I don't mean with a bunker full of canned beans. I mean spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Can you meet the unknown with an open heart? Can you sit in uncertainty and not go crazy? Can you face the disintegration of old systems without losing your center? Because that's what matters. And this is exactly what spiritual practice prepares us for. This is the purpose of practice. This is what I write about in Awake and all of the sections on letting go of ideas, systems, people, right? The practice is the same. It's always the same. Meditate, watch your thoughts, practice devotion, even if it's just watering your plants with some level of awareness. Forgive. Let go of what no longer serves you. People, ideas, whatever. Journal, reflect, breathe, right? Observe the mind, shape your thoughts, transform your reality, right? Whether it's 2027 or 2097 or Tuesday afternoon, the spiritual path doesn't change. But if we use 2027 as a symbolic milestone, a cosmic checkpoint, then let it be the reason we show up more deeply. Let it be a call for inner maturity. Let it be a cosmic alarm clock that says, wake up, it's time. Because when we get into the topic of 2027, we hear the fear narrative coming out of the mouths of the materialists, the war people. They're scared of what's coming. They're scared of how the government, will use it to manipulate us, which I understand. If you spent your entire human life, buying in and letting the government manipulate you, then I would be afraid too. They live in that world, afraid of the world, afraid of what they see in the sky. And I always come back to this. The sky might be full of lights, but the real mystery isn't up there. It's in you. You don't know shit about you. You've never sat with you. Well, some of you have, maybe on Sundays, 8 p.m. Kind of. I don't know. Remember, you are the one having the experience. You are the awareness sitting with it all. You're watching it all. So even if a 10-foot tall mantis being shows up in your backyard with a crystal wand and a message from the Galactic Federation, by the way, that all the things that I just mentioned have been mentioned by ex-military and some current military, it's still your consciousness reacting to it, right? So the real work is always the same. Know yourself, the soul. Watch your mind, love your people, stay present. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a bunker. You just have to be here, awake, open, and willing to listen. Because maybe the message of 2027 isn't get ready for disclosure. Maybe it's disclose yourself, capital S, to yourself. That's it. Maybe nothing happens in 2027. Maybe everything does, but either way, the path is the same. Let the mystery stay mysterious, but keep your heart open, keep your mind clear. I love you. Stay awake. Thank you.